Good morning. This is the Lou Rockwell Show, and it's great to have as our guest Sibel Edmonds. Sibel has been on before. She's always one of our most popular, most listened to guests. And if you've not heard her before, you're going to understand why that's the case. She was a translator for the FBI. By the way, she's fluent in Turkish, Farsi, and Azerbaijani. And because of what she knew about 9/11 was silence, a total violation of her civil liberties and of what is supposed to be the case in the United States. She was silenced and not allowed to speak for a very, very long time. And I imagine some of that stuff still applies to you, Sibel. But of course, you exercise your free speech and you exercise your free writing. And you're the author already of two very important books. First is Classified Woman, the Sibel Edmonds story. Very, very, it could be fiction, except that it's unfortunately all too real as to what happened to her. And then also The Lone Gladio, which is a novel in the tradition of the Romana Clef. It tells the truth, talks about real people, but in order to avoid a hit squad, whatever, they have fictional names. Now she's working on another book. I think Sibel has to do with the detention centers, black sites, the various CIA camps established around the world to where they'd like to put many of us. Sibel Edmonds is one of those polymaths on foreign affairs and intelligence matters. She could talk about 101 different things, but today we're going to talk about what the empire is doing in Turkey, in the Kurdish areas, and in that part of the world, and why ISIS is not some terrorist group that sprung up out of the soil just by magic, but was actually a creation of the U.S.
Well, you hit the highlight of the issue, the topic of what has been happening in Turkey, with Syria, with the what they call the Kurdish issue. And yes, the empire has been very successful, highly successful to maintain the divide and chaos in the region for the ultimate purpose of dominance in the region. And for that, of course, it has been playing various chess pieces, and many of these chess pieces are part of the empire side, not as it is being talked about in the mainstream media as either independent actors such as ISIS or Assad's regime per se.
And of course, they've murdered an unbelievable number of people in Syria, and the people that the U.S. is supporting to overthrow Assad and company have promised that they're going to ethnically cleanse the few remaining Christians who have lived successfully in Syria since the time of the apostles. Many of them already pushed out. They'll push out the remainder and probably kill many more. And they also intend to kill all the Alawites. It's the Muslim sect that Assad and his family belong to. So there's going to be much more blood on the empire's hands, but I guess they like it. They must enjoy it. They must be the sort of figures who actually enjoy killing people, bombing, destroying, wrecking. They must get a charge out of it.
Absolutely. I have been using the term I coined. I call it ISIS or us.
Huh.
Right, because it is. And this is not any kind of a speculation or conspiracy theory. In 2011, between October and December of 2011, at a BFP report, Boiling Frogs Post, we broke exclusive news story about U.S. NATO forces in southern Turkey. U.S. has a base. It's called Incirlik Base. It's in southern Turkey. It's close to the Syrian border, Turkey-Syria border region. And that the fact that based on sources in Turkey, and these include the military sources in Turkey and two sources here with U.S. military, we broke the story about how the United States NATO Turkish forces were bringing in these factions from Syria into the base, training them, military training, arming them, and then funneling them back into Syria for the purpose of creating this chaos and also this entire opposition to Assad. Well, whatever they say today and whatever the U.S. media is saying is absolutely contrary to the facts, to the truth. These are the people we trained for this exact purpose. It started as ISIL and then became ISIS, now short IS. These are the people, many of them, thousands of them. We, United States, together with NATO forces and Turkish, with the cooperation of the Turkish forces, we brought them into Turkey, we trained them, we armed them, and we funneled them back into Syria. So now they are trying, the media and the United States, the Western world, they are trying to distinguish between ISIS and some real opposition to Assad in Syria. And then, of course, there's this faction, the question of the Kurdish faction there, who have been also armed and trained by the United States, who are saying that they are fighting against ISIS, but actually ISIS is on our side. So you are looking at this complete chaos and mess that was artificially designed per plans and put in place for the ultimate goal of moving forward with the imperial pursuits. Yet, when you look at the media, and unfortunately, the takeoff, the majority here, thanks to the media and what they are being fed, we are looking at a replacement brand for Al Qaeda. In fact, this is what I have been talking about, writing about lately. This is changing one brand to another brand. It's all about marketing, and it exhibits main marketing features in it. When one brand starts losing its reach and its power, sometimes you change your logo, you rebrand your product or what you're doing, your service. And that's exactly what we have been doing with this phenomena called ISIS. And if you look at the marketing scheme, it's not different. In fact, it is identical to the marketing promotional methods that we practiced, the United States, together with its arm in the media with Al Qaeda. I just put together this show a few days ago, and I put them side by side. I put the headlines from 2002 to 2004, when Al Qaeda was heavily being promoted. It went from some Afghan cells into they are all over Europe, they are mushrooming. The fact that they have biological weapons capability, chemical weapons capability, they have even suitcase nuclear bombs. And actually, I put them one by one and compared word by word with the promotional marketing material being fed to the public by the US mainstream media with ISIS using exactly the same features. They went from hundreds and thousands into they are all over Europe. They have 12 cells in Belgium. They have 18 cells in France. Some of them are doctors. Some of them are surgeons. Some of them have blue eyes. And lo and behold, in the past 2 months, New York Times and Wall Street Journal and Guardian UK, they have been selling the idea that they have biological weapons. They have chemical weapons. They are seeking nuclear weapons. Further, I compared and contrasted to what we did with Al Qaeda's supposed so-called financial network. First, it was said in 2002 that Al Qaeda and bin Laden, they had $150, $200 million net worth as a terror organization. By 2005, they made that number to be somewhere between $1 and $2 billion. Well, they are doing the same thing. The current headlines from these mainstream media publications actually is saying ISIS is currently the wealthiest terror organization, and this is the exact headline, on the planet. On the planet. They have
not counting the CIA.
Right. So the marketing material is the same. The brand has changed, as we did with Al Qaeda in 1980s against the Soviet Union, how we trained them, how we worked, the CIA with Al Qaeda, including bin Laden. Well, the same thing holds true for ISIS. And it was not that long ago. We don't have to go back 30 years. This started around the same time we began the offensive against Libya. And this was simultaneously was being done in Turkey using our ally NATO member Turkey and the base there, and of course the strategic locations to carve out the same kind of situation with Syria. And of course, it was expected initially in 2011, when the CIA, NATO forces created ISIS, that it was going to be a fairly quick, maybe a little bit longer than Libya, but 6 months to a year operation. But what happened was, lo and behold, the whole issue started taking place in Ukraine. And with Russia's opposition, this entire scenario and the script that was put in place on Syria was placed on the back burner temporarily for a year and a half. And and if you look at the timing, as soon as the issue with Ukraine started kind of calming down and quieted down, bam, we had this explosive, richest, and the biggest terror organization on the planet, ISIS, being hyped up again. And also, the other unexpected element here was what was going to happen, how the imperial powers were going to play out this whole delicate issue of Turks and Kurds, because they don't have any problem, Turkey, to join forces and basically do the dirty work for the US and NATO and go and bomb the hell out of the Syrian and go into the airstrikes, etc. However, United States and NATO, they have been also partnering up with the Kurds in that region. And that is a very touchy, sensitive issue with Turkey, because Turkey also has a second front war with the Kurdish minority, both in Turkey, but also in northern Iraq and in northern Syria. So they have been in this dance negotiation position for the past few months, the United States and Turkey. US says, well, you're using our air missiles and our weapons against the Kurds instead of Syria. And Turkey has been saying, if you want our partnership in what you're doing with your imperial pursuits, you have to get out of this partnership with the Kurds. And that's exactly where we are currently with the situation in this trio: US, Kurds issue, and Turkey.
I noticed that there have been some U.S. senators who have urged the U.S. to form a Kurdistan and to arm it, but I don't hear that talk anymore.
Of course not, because that would be an absolute no-no area for Turkey. That issue came up during the first 6 months of our setup offensive against Iraq in 2002, 2003. And that was the main reason Turkey, for the first 3 years, they objected and they said the United States cannot use the air base and Turkey for its operations and including logistics in its war with Iraq. And the reason that came about, which mainstream media really didn't ever bring it up, had to do with the issue of the Kurds, because in that case, the United States was also forming this partnership training the Kurds in northern Iraq. They are basically finding themselves in the same position, because one of the things that Brits are good at, and US and Britain, they both do, when they basically pull out of the hat the Kurdish maneuver, what they do is they go and they give them this promise that in return for their help, they are going to look into carving out this portion from northern Iraq so the Kurds can have the free, independent Kurdistan region. Kurds currently are the largest minority in the world without land, without their own country. I mean, you're looking at just Turkey alone has about 10, 15 million Kurds. And if you start adding the Kurds in northwestern Iran, the Kurds in northern Iraq, the Kurds in northern Syria, you're looking at a very, very large population that has been in this battle of getting their own independent nation. So they make these promises, the Western Empire, and then once they are finished utilizing the Kurds, they feed the Kurds back into the wolves. Meaning then they go to Turkey and say, we are done with them. Now you can go bomb the hell out of them and we will never talk about the Kurdistan issue, etc. And you would think that after so many times being used in this kind of scheme, the Kurds would kind of be more awake of knowing that these are basically hollow, baseless promises, that they actually are being strategically used for whatever purpose the West has. But obviously, they are not learning any lessons, because they are finding themselves the situation exactly the same as before. And they are very well armed and very well trained, and they are very capable. They are very good in guerrilla warfare. They are very good in maneuvering within those porous mountainous regions. So as far as the forces goes militaristically, it is, of course, a great strategy for the Western Empire to use the Kurds. But as before, as we are going to see what's going to happen between Turkey and US negotiation, they are always a negotiation card that can be disposed of at any given moment. And we are going to see what's going to happen with that bargaining dance that currently taking place between US and Turkey.
Sibel, aren't the Kurds sort of a dependency of Israel as well? I mean, I remember this many years ago when I would read William Safire, the late William Safire's column in the New York Times, and I can't tell you how many times he said, "Oh, the Kurds, they're great people, wonderful, wonderful." And I mean, what's the story there?
Well, you touched upon a highly blacked out fact story, and that is what took place between 2003 and 2006 in northern Iraq. What happened was, as we went and had our aggression against Iraq and we got rid of Saddam during all this time period, Israel and its forces, both military and intelligence, they went and they forged these alliance with one of the most powerful Kurdish factions in northern Iraq. They said, and this is Israelis, they said, look, let's have a partnership. We want to install military and intelligence base right here in northern Iraq, which borders northwestern Iran, okay? So this is right on the border area with Iran. In return, we will give you arms, we will train you in all sorts of military trainings, including commando warfare. And also, of course, we represent some of your interests with the Western Empire, with Washington. So this alliance was formed, and Israel went into northern Iraq, and they actually had and put place, and they still have it, these bases, covert yet formal bases, intelligence and military bases in northern Iraq. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened was this really ticked off Turkey and the Turkish government and Turkish military. So behind the scene, they were carrying out this, basically letting off big time steam to US and saying, you have to interfere with this, and this has to stop. And we will not tolerate Israeli bases in northern Iraq when they are forging this partnership with our enemy, the terrorist Kurds. That's what Turks call them, the terrorist Kurds. Well, US really didn't do anything. They just sat there. Of course, we know that our foreign policy is completely guided and managed by Israel's interests in the United States. And after a while, Turks said, fine, if you're not doing anything, we're going to take the matters into our own hands. So what they did was they formed their own special intelligence and military operatives and units, and they basically went into northern Iraq in order to both gather information, but also, when opportunity arises, interrupt some of this activities, operations by the Israeli-Kurdish alliance in northern Iraq. But what happened was, at this point, the US intelligence were tipped off by Israel that, yes, they had identified these Turkish operatives, this military intelligence unit in northern Iraq, but in order to keep everything covert, they didn't want to do anything themselves, Israelis. So they basically ordered, they asked would be mild, it would be more like ordering the US military through State Department and Pentagon, saying, we want you to go and get rid of these units and basically kick them out of here. So while some of these high levels, some of them were lieutenant generals, okay, in this covert operations station in northern Iraq, trying to find out what they were doing, Israeli, with their Israel base and the Kurds, lo and behold, they're in the middle of these eavesdropping operation, and they had this unit from US military, Pentagon, storming inside, grabbing them, handcuffing them, and putting bags on their heads, just like the way they do it with the detainees for Guantanamo. But you are looking at high-level military officers, Turkish military officers, ally nation, NATO member. Well, this became a huge scandal, and actually it became front-page news in the United States, minus the fact that why these units were there, and there was no mentioning of the Israeli bases in northern Iraq and the partnership forged. So they basically blacked out that entire part of that story. So it became one of those mysterious stories that Americans read and they kind of scratched their heads and say, why in the world United States military, they go and they get ally nations, NATO members, generals, and put bags in their heads. Of course, to save face, U.S. Formally apologized to Turkey, and they said it was due to some misunderstanding, and they released these generals, these lieutenant generals, back to Turkey after 4 days detaining them in Iraq. At this point, some of these generals, Turkish generals, who have been for 2 decades main sources for Seymour Hersh, and Seymour Hersh, the journalist, they said, fine, we are going to leak the information together with all the documentation, the aerial photography of Israeli bases in northern Iraq and the operations, everything. We'll give it to him and have him exposed, since Washington Post and New York Times, all these people, they actually intentionally took out the part with Israeli bases in northern Iraq. So in 2006, end of 2005, 2006, Seymour Hersh actually went to Turkey. And back then I lived in Alexandria. And he said, to me, I'm going to go and meet with my general sources. He went to Turkey. He met with these generals. They handed him every single documentation, variable documents, aerial shots showing that Israeli bases exactly where they are in northern Iraq. Well, Seymour Hersh came back to the United States and that story was killed. He never published it. And that just really pissed off the Turks, and they went about making this nationalist movie called The Valley of the Wolves, which is a take on Grey Wolves and Operation Gladio. And I mean, this is a high budget movie. It won a bunch of awards. I mean, you're looking at $50-60 million budget movies. They made it in, with some German production company, and they heavily promoted it, trying to let basically people know what that was about in a fiction movie. So I'm providing this context, and I know I'm kind of going really long talking about it because I know our listeners, most people in the US, if not all, they've never heard these stories.
No.
And these stories are and they have been covered by mainstream media in not only Turkey, but elsewhere in the Middle East. But it was successfully blacked out by the US media and the Israel lobby, of course. And we are looking at similar things coming into play with northern Syria and the issue of Turkey versus the Kurds. But that whole case of Israeli bases in northern Iraq has really never been exposed, despite the fact that even so-called award-winning Pulitzer-winning journalists, their allegiance are first to the Israel before it is to any journalism or the United States or the people in the United States. From Israel's perspective, you can see the value of being there in northern Iraq, right along the northwestern border of Iran. I mean, we already have bases there. I mean, when you look at then Afghanistan and Pakistan, and you look at northern Iraq with these Israeli bases, Turkey, the NATO Operation Gladio ally in northern part of Iran, you're looking at how basically we have surrounded Iran from basically every single border points.
There's a wonderful illustration of the country of Iran surrounded by all the U.S. bases and demanding to know, why did the Iranians build their country so close to our bases?
Right. And with the last 2 years talk with the agreement with Iran that they're trying to promote it as marketed, it is just like the issue of Syria that was placed on the back burner when we were tackling Ukraine front, and then restarted again once that front went into the passive mode. Same thing we are going to see with Iran. Whatever you're seeing is temporary, because currently we have Iraq and Syria And once that is done, we are going to be back in the same situation with Iran basically being the last stop, is the last domino in this domino piece. And also, it has other benefits too. It is being played as one of the marketing and promotional points for Democrats, for the Democrats and Obama administration, showing all people from that front as peace loving. Look how they were so compromising. And instead of being tough on Iran, they went and they put together and they pushed for this agreement despite all the opposition in Congress and the right wing people. I mean, this is going to be all played out that way. We are going to have election. And my prediction here, because we are on record right now here, would be within second year of whoever is the president, second to third year of whoever is the president, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican, everything is going to be nullified with whatever this agreement that is being hyped and played as, oh, okay, so now we are making peace with Iran and we are no longer looking at it's imminent and there's going to be next offense, the last piece, Iran is coming, because that piece is going to come, is inevitable for all sorts of marketing and strategic purposes and other indirect benefits, such as the promotional material for the current administration. It is being placed temporarily on hold, on the back burner, and it will be all reopened again.
Sibel, what's happening with Erdogan? I mean, he's having some troubles internally in Turkey. Is this a product of his own bad rule, which I'm sure he's like every politician, he's ultimately a creep, or is the U.S. running some kind of color revolution thing to weaken him or to make him be more obedient in terms of all things we're talking about?
I think it's putting it mildly to say is kind of in trouble. It is in deep trouble currently, Turkey and the political climate there. There are several factors. So I guess it would be simplistic to just say it's all U.S. doing, or to say it's all his doing, his own doing, and that being him being Erdogan. It is so complex, and I spent some time in the region. It's many-fronted. We know that the whole thing with U.S. began with the West, with the Gezi protests in 2012, 2011, 2013. And we also know about the fallout between Erdogan and his administration, AKP party, and Mullah Fethullah Gulen, the CIA Islamic frontman for Turkey, the man who has been in the United States, Fethullah Gulen, since we talked about that in your previous episodes. Since
Yes.
1997. Basically, there has been this fallout between Erdogan and the United States, and by the United States, I mean CIA Operation Gladio NATO, since that 2011, because we back that Mullah Fethullah Gulen and the network we created for him for our operations, not only for operations in Turkey, but also other operations, covert operations we are running in Central Asia and in Caucasus, in Azerbaijan and in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, etc. So that was one factor and still is heavily at play with that fallout, because his network, his organization's network, Fethullah Gulen's, is minimum of 20, this is the known part, $22 billion. Several major mainstream media organizations in Turkey are owned by Fethullah Gulen's network, including Zaman, one of the few English, they also have an English version, newspapers in Turkey. So that factor has been in play for at least 4 years. Then the second issue comes with what's happening with Syria. And we have had in Turkey over 2 million refugees have poured into Turkey. I mean, the chaos and problems and issues that have created. Imagine for a country, the size of the country in terms of how big the country is geographically, you're looking at a country the size of Texas. Turkey is the same size as the state of Texas, okay? Now imagine you open the gate, and not over 10 or 20 or 50 years period, but over 2 years period, you have 2 million refugees coming into Texas simultaneous. So with that, so much problems have taken place in Turkey from health points of view. Some of the issues that kind of were eradicated. They are back. Diseases. You have these tense refugee camps, not only along the border, in the middle of Istanbul, you get these people. And then you have faction of Syrian refugees who are going to workplaces and businesses and they are saying, well, if you're paying, I'm just going to throw a number here, $850 for your Turkish worker, I'm willing to work for you for 200. So many Turks, maybe I shouldn't say many because I don't have the exact number. There are workers who are losing jobs under the table. These companies, they are hiring these Syrian refugees who are willing to work for 20% of that salary given to a Turkish worker. So that has been creating tension. Of course, you have the other political factions who are carrying out their own activities. Then, of course, you have this latest terror event where the female suicide bomber blew herself up in southern Turkey. 34 people lost their lives, hundreds of people, they got injured. You have that situation. Most importantly, currently, and that is ultimate benefit for the United States and for Gülen's network, is Turkey is at this brink of economic collapse because Turkey has been doing fantastic for the past 10 years or so. While we have been watching Europe collapsing during the crisis 2012, 2013, Turkey showed very strong economic performance. The Turkish stocks went really and stayed up there. And of course, a lot of investment started pouring into Turkey while Europe was having all those problems. A lot of investment came from Arab countries. They found the climate and Turkey good for their future investments. So you had Saudis and Kuwaitis and United Arab Emirates with lots of money, billions of dollars, investing heavily in Turkey. And the investments, much of it went into building and improving infrastructure. And I have to say, they have done amazing works, whether it is building additional highly important bridges, tunnels, metro system, other kinds of construction projects, dams. As a result, they also ended up having this bubble created in Turkey, especially real estate bubble. You see, Turks are about, if you were to throw a number, 25, 30 years behind US in things. For example, in Turkey, 25 years ago, when I was there, nobody used credit cards. Okay. Everybody believed in cash in hand. So people bought what they could afford with cash. I mean, you went with a little briefcase full of cash and you bought, and sometimes foreign currency, because Turkish lira has always been volatile, and you bought yourself a house. You know, you paid $300,000 in cash. They didn't even use check. About 15 years ago, the use of credit cards, Visa, MasterCard, Amex, started getting really promoted in Turkey. And just like with US real estate scheme that took place in 2006, 2005, all the way till the collapse in 2008, they introduced this extremely not fixed, low interest rates for buying homes. So people, in Turkey, being so new into this whole concept of spending the money you don't have, they started doing it, and this is right now this case. There's a big real estate bubble. And then you have people with huge level of debts on credit cards. They are spending the money they don't have, and they haven't experienced the hit that comes as a consequence of this change. That point is nearing. And when I'm saying nearing, I'm not talking about a year. I'm talking about a few months maximum, because with the situation of political instability, and that is, there is no majority government. They're going to have another elections in November. They failed to form a coalition government with the opposition. So you have this unclear political situation, which affects the stock market for Turkish stocks. Then you had these terror incidents and the situation with Syria. And that this year affected the tourism industry tremendously. It hit it so very hard. And tourism industry is the second or the third large economic industry in Turkey. They had a lot of European tour groups, etc., who canceled their trips to Turkey. They don't want to be visiting some historic mosques in Istanbul and a suicide bomber blows herself up. So tourism got hit tremendously. I, of course, mentioned the issue of 2 million refugees, and of course, these workers who are willing to work for 20% of the salary. In addition to that, and this is also very important, is Turkey has been paying dearly. They are paying the price for U.S. forced European embargo on Russia. One of the first top industries in Turkey is textile, okay? And what happened is with Europeans going along with US empire's order and having embargoes on Russia, well, these European countries like Germany, Italy, their exports of their luxury textile products. You're looking at Gianfranco Ferré, Hugo Boss, these brand suits and the sweaters, etc. Russia became 30% of their export market for all these designer textile brands. And they were not produced in those nations in Europe, like in Germany or Italy. Many of these companies, they use Turkey and Turkish-grade textile factories, and they outsourced it to Turkey. So Turkish factories, they take the orders, they produce it, they put labels of Hugo Boss or Polo Ralph Lauren or whatever it is, and then it gets shipped to Russia. Well, with the embargo on Russia, Turkish textile industry factories have lost close to 50% of their business because Europe has stopped ordering because of the embargo on Russia. And even though Turkey doesn't have any embargo against Russia, is an indirect sufferer in this whole scheme, which again, many Turks blame and again, US foreign policy and imperial policies. It's been hurting Turkey economically. So between the tourism, the textile industry, due to the embargo on Russia, with the terrorism events that took place, has been taking place in the past 4 months, all these together, and the credit card debts and the real estate bubble, you're looking at a country that is about to economically collapse anytime now. And your question was on Erdogan. And when you ask, well, what's happening and what's going to happen with Erdogan, that's going to be the major factor determining what's going to happen with Erdogan's administration. They have formed this date on November 7th or 20th for the election. But if this economic collapse happens before then, let's say by October, which is highly likely that it will take place, then you may look at the big major possibility of a period of pure chaos and violence, followed by possibly another military coup in Turkey, which will be the Operation Gladio and the rulers basically taking back the Turkish government, which took place, Turkish military coup, which is always backed and done with the United States, by the United States. We had it in 1981. We had it in 1997. The pretext for that would be the country is collapsing. We have all this violence. The economy has collapsed. So this is time for a military coup to reestablish order and maintain order. So that would be, if the collapse occurred before the coming election, which is highly likely, we are looking at high possibility of another coup in Turkey, unfortunately.
Sibel, I thank you so much for this wonderful seminar in truth about the things that the media doesn't inform us and, of course, tries to hide from us at the behest of the government. And I want to recommend that everybody follow you on your Boiling Frogs Post website. And you have a new podcast. We'll link to this too, Probable Cause podcast. So thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for all the work you do. Of course, we'll link to your two wonderful books as well. And thanks for your work.
Well, many thanks for inviting me again, Lou. It's always a privilege. It's an honor. Thank you.
Bye-bye, Sibel.
Bye-bye.
Well, thanks so much for listening to the Lou Rockwell Show today. Take a look at all the podcasts. There have been hundreds of them. There's a link on the LRC front page. Thank you.